Hi, I'm Metta Spencer, and today I get to spend some time with four really fine people who are friends of mine. In Washington, D.C., we have Mubarak Awad. Can you say hi, Mubarak?
Hi, how are you?
That's good. Okay, and also in Washington is Michael Beer. Hello, Michael.
Hi, nice to see you all.
Okay, great. And in British Columbia, Victoria, we have Yeshua Moser Puangsuwan. Yeshua, say hi.
Good morning, everyone, from the beautiful west coast of Canada.
Great. And in Kiev, Ukraine, we have Kamenshikov. Hello, Andrei.
Hello from Kiev.
Yes, great. Okay, and these fellows are all part of something called Nonviolence International, which everybody should know about. Very good find. All right, I want to start off by asking the founder of this organization, Mubarak Awad, to tell us a little bit about how this all came about. The first time I saw him was well over 30 years ago, when he had just arrived in the United States after having conflict with the government of Israel, because he had led a very impressive nonviolent intifada movement in Palestine. And the story about that was so interesting that I wish we could take the whole time just to talk about all the things he invented then as ways of doing resistance. At any rate, I want to say hello, Mubarak. Tell us a little bit about how you came to be Mubarak Awad sitting in Washington, D.C. today.
Thank you. I finished my education in the United States, and it was mostly into psychology and I went back home after that, and I started a center called the Palestinian Counseling Center. And I find out after that a lot of people, they're not so much interested in counseling other than being under occupation, is to get rid of occupation. So then I decided, okay, I will start a center to get rid of occupation. I called it the Palestinian Center for the Study of Nonviolence, that people should use the methods of nonviolence to resist occupation. And I start training, I start bringing information, books, materials. I went to India and tried to get people from that area and try to find Muslims, people who have been into nonviolence. I was introduced to a fellow in India, his name Abdul Ghaffar Khan. So we translate some of his books into Arabic. Then also I was introduced to Gene Sharp, and I translated some of his books without his knowledge, and he got upset and mad about it. But then we became so close friends, and several times he came and gave lectures to the Palestinians, both the leadership as well as in universities about nonviolence and the effects of it. I took him also to meet in that time Arafat and all the Abus there, and to tell them what is the power of nonviolence. So on all levels that we were able to introduce the work of nonviolence.
Well, excuse me, but I really want to know how Arafat reacted to Gene Sharp. That must have been an interesting story.
It is. It's very interesting. Those mostly in the military of the PLO were so much interested in that because they felt that it's an alternative. And the Palestinian Authority, they know they cannot beat Israel in the military might. So they were very much interested in an alternative to the armed struggle. And they want to know more information on that. Then it was so much that a lot of Palestinians, both Muslims and Christians, more Muslims, became very interested in every Wednesday I will have lectures about nonviolence in our center. And that created a big problem for the Israelis. they want to know who is helping me, where the money comes from, why I'm doing that. And they became entering our office, breaking everything in the office, destroying all the computers, and they have no idea of that it's an interest for me because of my religion. I really, of my mother, she always pushed that I would not kill, I would not carry arms, I would not do any revenge of the death of my father when I was 5 years old. And that kept it in my head.
She's Christian.
She's a Christian, and we were 7 boys and girls, and we were all have that concept that we should not revenge. And the one who killed your dad, she always will tell us that he doesn't know that he left me as a widow with all of you as children. So don't kill, because killing is not to destroy that person, you destroy a family, you destroy a community. So that have a very big effect on me to push hard for the Palestinian and to do nonviolence work. And I was going to universities, I was going to lecture everywhere, going to villages, and have a library on wheel with Gandhi's huge pictures about him, how India was being out of the British occupation with this Gandhi skinny, and they don't have the guns, but they were able to succeed in nonviolence. And I was pushing also about Martin Luther King, how that effect in the United States, from slavery to freedom, and so that they have to do that. I was so excited about also the Native American in the United States, that with all their suffering, they still continue to struggle for their freedom. So those 3 things were really part of that. Then the Israeli was tough on me. They took me to court. They put me in prison several times. And in one occasion when I was in prison, the fellow who was the head of Truman Institute, his name is Eddie Kaufman, and he decided as a Jew, as an Israeli, even as a Zionist, I went on a hunger strike. He decided to go on a hunger strike while outside the prison.
Wow.
And
What did they charge you with? If they threw you in jail, they must have had something to accuse you of.
Well, first I would not take a permission for having a group of people or protest or anything, because I wouldn't accept that the occupation or take a permission from the Israeli military to have a march, which they would not give me a permission, but that's part of that. But for that really affected me so much when Eddie was fasting outside. Then a lot of Israeli people start throwing trash on him, and it was in the paper, how dare you, okay, fast for a fellow prisoner who's a Palestinian in prison, and he have to bring his children from the Air Force to stay around him so that he would not be trashed by Israelis. And for me, that changed so much of my thinking, that Israelis are humans like us, and we could deal and work with each other to get this burden of occupation away, because it's destroying us, but also destroy the whole concept of an Israeli society to occupy people, which they want freedom and they want to live without a military might forcing them on every issue of life. Then I was, in 88, I was deported, and we went to the High Court, and the High Court agreed with the Prime Minister of Israel that I am the most dangerous person in Israel and I want out. And United States, even the president of the United States at that time was Reagan, was sending Schultz, okay, to come and talk to the Israeli and telling them that you need more like a fellow who's interested in nonviolence rather than violence, but the Israeli wouldn't listen. While I was still in Jerusalem, I really thought that this nonviolence work is not only for the Palestinians, also for the Israelis and for anybody who's interested in that. It's not belong to anybody. It belongs to everybody, which is an amazing thing. So when I came, I decided to start Nonviolence International so that we will send, or what I learned from the occupation in Israel and military occupation there, that we could send it to others and to tell people not to be afraid. When you have justice, when you have your human right being violated, don't just sit and do nothing. You can do everything about it. And I start writing, I start pushing hard, and we met people from Thailand. We have an office in Thailand. We met people in Sudan. We have office in Sudan. And after I left Jerusalem, I have a nephew, his name is Sami Awad. He started Holy Land Trust and he's taking over there and start teaching others. So it's a live and a continue effort of nonviolence. And then Michael Beer, his parents came to see me and they said, we have a young fellow and he fits with you. And we welcome him, and he is with us for more than 30 years now at Nonviolence International.
He's running the office now, mainly, right?
Yeah, in the office. And I was able to still continue my effort working with the youth while I am doing nonviolence work. And that was very helpful for us. Then Joshua came in and we felt he was doing a great job and introduced us to his effort.
You're saying Yeshua came in.
Yeshua, yeah. With the Dalai Lama and the effort over there. And in Tibet, we work very hard. And we have a lot of success. And we have also in Latin America, we have a fellow that was working very hard in Latin America. And also then we got in touch with people in Russia and yeah, and we have really a good people everywhere. And Andre was so able until even the Russian government, for one reason or another, they kick us Nonviolence International out of Russia because we are
he's the most dangerous man in Russia if he's following your footsteps.
Yeah, so poor fellow, he lost everything there, but he continued working on the effort of
in Kiev. We should say he's based in Kiev now.
In Kiev now, yeah. So it's not the idea that we need to have a big organization. Most of the thing that I felt strongly that we have to help grassroots activists who even start in their community, and how we could help them to give them more education, to give them more let them see that it's not new what they are doing, and support them both financially and in different ways that they are able to maintain themselves. Because many times people think that they have to start from the beginning. They don't. So we start translating our work to different languages, and we start having on Nonviolent International like a very big section of training, or training the trainers. We have people who want to have organizations, so we start helping people how to organize, how to do their taxes, or we were able to help them being their fiscal sponsor. And Michael will say a lot about how many people we are working with fiscal sponsors in the world with us. We also have to, for new people who start also, we have to let them understand there are more people in nonviolence around the world to give them contact with those people. So those people will be able to mention the names of those people, where they are, what their problem is, and either on the internet or on TV to mention it. And that's how we became very active on Nonviolence International.
I hear that now you're doing work with delinquent youth.
That a term paper I want to make about in Lima, Ohio, about children who are in prison in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very upset and angry that they have children 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years. They are in prison in Lima, Ohio, behind bars. And I was so upset, and I was fighting with the judge, fighting with the county. And they told me that, well, if you have any alternative, you take them. So I took them. I took them wherever I was in college in that time. I have them in my dorm. And then I started what we call it the Ohio Youth Advocate Program. And the president of the university there, he told me, we cannot do that. You have to have an organization, you have to have bylaws, you have to have board. So he really woke me up into doing all those. And now we have really more than 1,000 kids a day, about kids that their parents cannot have them, or they are delinquents, or they are abused or neglected. And just recently, we went to the southern border when the Trump administration really started putting children into cages. Mm-hmm. And I took the board with me, and I told them we have to do some work for those Latino kids. And now we have a very big program for Latino kids. We take them out of institution and put them in a trained foster parents who are Latino, who speak Spanish for them until their day in court, or if they are deported, or we find places for them if the court wants them to stay in the States. So we feel so good when we are working with children and youth.
That is just wonderful. Bless your heart. It's saintly work. Now let's see. We've got 3 other saints to consult here. I don't know which of you come first. I think the one I've known the longest, no, I'm not sure whether I've known Yeshua or Andre longer, but let's say Andre, because I was always running into you in Moscow. And even when you were also down in Chechnya, doing peace work even during the war. Can you tell me a bit about your own trajectory, how you got to be the guy you are, and how you formed a relationship with these other 3 blokes?
I'll start by saying I'm no saint.
They'll find that out quick enough, unfortunately.
The way I started, I joke about it because it happened. I was born on April 15th, 1967, and I was born late in the evening. And that morning, my mom attended an anti-war demonstration in New York City against the Vietnam War. So I joke that my experience in peace building is like 12 hours greater than my life.
Good for your mom. It looks like your mom and Mubarak's mom did a very good job.
Yeah, I guess so. I was, at the time, I recently graduated the Department of Sociology of Moscow State University, and I was really kind of in a state where I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. When I grew up, I was born in New York, but I lived most of my life in the USSR then, And when that
Your
country
father
collapsed,
was a Soviet and your mom was
yes,
an
yes,
American.
Mom was American, yeah. So I had this dual
Okay.
background, and I remember that when the system collapsed, it was a difficult time because suddenly you felt there was all this uncertainty around, and I remember at one point, actually it was my 25th birthday, I was thinking about what am I doing in life, and I don't know how it just popped up in my head that I should get involved in peace building. I was in the States at the time that I came up with this decision, and I started traveling around and meeting different groups and organizations that were doing something in this field. And one of the groups that I met then for the first time was Nonviolence International in the basement of Mubarak's apartment in DC. And then when I returned back to Russia, I started going to some of these so-called conflict zones and trying to figure out, if there's anything positive that I can do. And I met some other people that had similar ideas. So we kind of formed a little group and worked a little bit in Transnistria, in Georgia and Abkhazia during the war there. And the next time, but one thing I realized very soon is when you go to these places and, when you're actually in one of these war zones or whatever, everybody asks you, who are you from? Who do you represent? You can't just be, Andrei Kamenshikov. Next time, about half a year later, when I came to the States, I did a little, I wrote up a little bit about my experience over the past few months and sent them around, and got a call from, I think it was Phil Bogdanov then at Nonviolence International. That was also part of the team then. And he said, oh, well, if you're in DC, show up. So I showed up, and I was looking for a cap to wear. And I remember meeting Mubarak, and he said, well, you're doing this good stuff. We can't support you. The only thing I can promise you is if you get killed, we'll take care of your funeral. So, okay.
Well, I remember, if I can interrupt you, when you were in Chechnya, I remember there were a lot of people being captured, taken hostage, kidnapped. All kinds of foreign workers were in danger there, and you were in danger too. And I remember you made it explicit that if they captured you, we were not to try to rescue you or pay a what do you call
Ransom.
it?
Ransom.
Ransom. Mm-hmm.
You
said, just let him kill me. I'm not going to be ransomed, which I thought was okay. That's pretty brave. Good for you.
Well, it's a difficult choice, and thank God I never had to face this choice. I remember a moment when, during that very difficult time, I was sitting in a car in Grozny, and the folks, the Chechens that were with me, left for some business, and I was just waiting for them in a car, and they left me. I had actually a Kalashnikov, a machine gun, lying on my lap, and I was sitting there and wondering, if someone wants to kidnap me, do I use or do I not use this weapon? It's one thing. But I did keep it on my lap, so if anyone just looks at me from the side, they see a weapon in your lap.
Tell me a bit about what you're doing now. I think my impression is that Nonviolence International in Moscow had to sort of fold up and go away, that you weren't able to continue because the government basically clamped down. But that all of the work you're doing in Kiev and in organizing in other Slavic countries is a continuation of that work, whether or not you call it that.
What we call it, we actually registered.
You're organizing a whole bunch of different, you're kind of a networking manager, right?
Yes. For many years, we had, let's say, two branches of our activities when we had Nonviolence International in Russia. And most of the core of our activities was in the North Caucasus areas, these places like Chechnya and neighboring areas where we did lots of work. But we also, starting probably about 1999, we also got involved in networking, and there were actually 2 consecutive networks of civil peace builders in this post-Soviet space. One was kind of a UNHCR project and folded after a few years, but the other one is still around, and it's part of a global network that's called GPAC, Global Partnership for Prevention of Armed Conflict. So when GPAC was developing, I happened to be the person that was doing the GPAC stuff in this part of the world. And so GPAC, it consists of 15 different regional networks. So there's this Eastern Europe GPAC regional network that I've been managing basically since it was established. So that was very helpful for me, because when our organization had to fold, and basically I had to leave because it wasn't a direct attack against me like it was against Mubarak, on the part of the Israeli state. In our case, it was more indirect, this Russian bureaucratic style thing. It wasn't really about our organization as such. It was this attack against any civil society, and really any independent civil society groups working in anything that has relationships to something political. So obviously, if you're doing peace building work, even if you're working closely with local authorities, police, and things like that, still it was seen as
Can I interrupt to ask how that is now? I talked to Bernard Driano in Paris a week ago, and he said there are groups still all over Russia who were members connected with the Helsinki Citizens Assembly, and they're still meeting and acting. And I thought, well, that's news to me. I really want to know more about that. Are there still groups that you're in touch with, or is it possible to be in touch with these groups in Russia as opposed to where you are now or other countries?
Yes, there are groups that remain, and that some of them are under very serious government pressure. Like one, luckily, when we had Nonviolence International in Moscow, our policy was never really focused much on organizational development. We had a very small team. Sometimes it could be 2 or 3 people. Sometimes it would be 5. I think that was maybe a couple of times for a short period we had like 6 or 7, but that was just within some project or something like that, because most of the work we did through cooperation, through joint projects with lots of local partners in the areas where we worked. And because we were small organizationally, we really didn't have the capacity to both continue our work and try to, resist this administrative and political pressure. And a lot also was related personally to me because, with my dual background, I was, the guy that was, always suspicious for authorities. So at one point I realized that I'm really becoming more of a liability to my partners in a sense, because, they're told, we can't trust, Kamenshikov, and stuff like that. So it was.
You were a spy, probably.
Well, the thing is that you're in a situation where you need to realize, because you're becoming a liability to the people that you're working with in a sense. So,
okay, but now you're organizing this GPAC thing,
yeah,
or
luckily,
you're running
we
it.
had this other branch with networking, and within this branch, we always had lots of activities in Ukraine. Ukraine was maybe the most active part of our regional GPAC network. And as things, developed in Ukraine and the war began and all that, I felt that, this is somewhere where I can be of use, let's say.
Good. Okay, I'm going to move on and catch up with Yeshua. Yeshua, I know that you were based for a long time in Bangkok, and I want you to explain how you wound up there?
I'm talking to you now from beautiful British Columbia, but I was born south of our border. And I had to face conscription during the Vietnam War, which I refused at that time. And that was a big part of my political education, as it was for many young men at that time. We got introduced to the concepts of nonviolence and how that was being used in social struggles, primarily for me at that time in the United States, against our own government's foreign policy. And as I started working with more groups on larger and larger levels, from the state level to the national level, I finally went abroad with an organization called Peace Brigades International. And I did 2 terms of service with them in Latin America, and then became their first long-term volunteer in Asia.
Now, those are the people who go on walks with people who are in danger in order to protect them with their bodies. Is that right?
The Nonviolent Protection Program for Endangered Human Rights Activists formed a big part of Peace Brigades International's work, because we found that by having an international near the homes and offices of local activists, they could carry on their work with lessened fear of violence on their lives, because governments felt free to eliminate them when they were safely distant from the diplomatic areas, the tourist areas, the areas where the wire services go. And so we extended that area of international awareness of what was going on with people as a form of protection. And that has become the idea of unarmed civil protection has become an area of activity for many organizations, but Peace Brigades International really pioneered that work. And as their first long-term volunteer in Asia, a member of our board was from Thailand. His name was is Sulaksi Varaksa. And he invited me to work for his non-governmental organization after I was done with my term with Peace Brigades, which I did. And that lasted for about a year, and I was focused on Burma through his organization. As our work wound down there, I went to a Burma conference in Washington, D.C., where I met up with Mubarak and Nonviolence International and said, well, this is what I'd like to pursue in Southeast Asia, and they said, go for it. So I set up an office of Nonviolence International in Southeast Asia, primarily focused on working with people's struggles there who were opposing some illegitimate use of power. And when I described what Nonviolence International does, I said, well, it's an organization that expands understanding of the use of nonviolent methods to resolve human problems, and helps people engage in using those methods.
I remember there was a time 15 years or so ago when you said we had dinner someplace, and you were telling me about having gone to visit one of the Taliban leaders.
That was actually, well, yes, that occurred. It wasn't the Taliban. It was the insurgency in Kashmir located in Pakistan. This is the event that you were thinking about. Nonviolence International was a very early endorser of the international campaign to ban landmines, long before it had the Mine Ban Treaty and the Nobel Peace Prize. And Nonviolence International, as a matter of principle, endorses most humanitarian disarmament campaigns, because once weapons are introduced into a conflict, they become harder to resolve by nonviolent and diplomatic methods. And so that was a mission that I had undertaken for the international campaign to ban landmines, specifically to encourage a set of non-state armed groups operating in Kashmir, but the place that you had to meet them was in Pakistan, to discuss with them coming on board the landmine ban, because not only governments use landmines, but also non-state armed groups use landmines. And so one of the activities that the ICBL encouraged its members to take, and Nonviolence International was a member, was to engage non-state armed groups in the landmine ban.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I had it a little wrong, but the basic idea was it was a thrilling adventure. I remember that.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, it was. It makes
now
for a ripping yarn, as we say.
a few years ago, you used to be half of every year in Thailand and half in Canada, as I recall. And you now have settled a little bit more, maybe in Victoria, British Columbia. But you still go back and forth. Tell me how you managed to keep one foot in each of these very different locations.
Well, much of my current work, not associated with Nonviolence International, is still Asia-focused. And I still spend half of the year in Thailand as the base of operations because my wife is Thai and we have a home there. The other half is here in Canada, and once I arrived, I set up a branch of Nonviolence International in Canada, which is a federal charity here in Canada. And most recently, we have supported nonviolence training around people opposing the expansion of the gas pipelines here. We also have supported a citizens consultation on Canada's new ambassador on women, peace, and security, because Nonviolence International is also a member of the Global Alliance for Ministries of Peace, and setting up the types of governmental structures that will pursue that, because almost all of our human societies say, well, we only engage in violence when all else fails. And I said, but what is the all else? How are you training people in the all else? Where is your infrastructure development in the all else? Mm-hmm. One time a few years ago, UNESCO had asked me to be a consultant for a program where the government of Sri Lanka had decided to integrate peace studies in all levels of its educational system. Remarkable. And they assembled a group. It included the ministers of education and the various rectors of universities and high school deans and so forth into a room to discuss how they were going to pursue it. And I said, how many university programs do you have that give degrees in peace studies up to the doctorate level? They didn't have any. Master's level? No, we don't have any. How many universities with full departments of peace studies do you have? None. I said, how many universities do you have that teach military studies? They didn't know. It was 4. Mm-hmm. And one of them gives degrees all the way up to the PhD level, and none of their students pay a cent to go through their studies. It's all supported out of the public purse. And I said, now do you want to know why your country is so messed up? Because they had just come out of a civil war. Where are you putting your investment? And before they felt too bad, I said, your situation is no different than any other human society.
That's true. I was one who taught a peace studies program, and when I retired, they retired the program too. Yeah. Okay, we need to move on. I want to thank you, and I want to talk to Michael Beer now, because I think Michael Beer is the only one who's supposed to be the bureaucrat of the outfit. Is that right, Michael? You're the administrator nowadays.
Yes, that's
how you spend your days and how you wound up in Washington, D.C., running an outfit like this.
That's a great question. I've been here most of my adult life, ran into Mubarak soon after I came here, and I grew up in a kind of Quaker Jewish heritage, very interested in nonviolence and human rights and global affairs, and was passionate about helping social movements and marginalized peoples, and was inspired by Mubarak's work to try to help other marginalized peoples around the world who are generally excluded from economic, political, and social power, and they're looking for other tools and ways to meet their needs. So it's really been a wonderful ride here, being a support person, solidarity person, helping marginalized peoples of all kinds all over the world with training, with resources, networking, raising awareness about them, and I've enjoyed it a great deal. And the nonviolence umbrella is a large one. It encompasses social movements from minority groups like the Kashmiris and the Palestinians and the Tibetans. It includes the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual movements, which have had a remarkable revolution in the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
All these marginalized peoples have really been able to emerge with humanity and be supported in many societies for being who they are. The women's movement has seen a remarkable change in the last 50 or 60 years. I don't think that anybody has ever been killed by the women's movement. And yet societies have been changed so profoundly. Of course, there's a lot more work to do. You can go look in the ecological, environmental movements where we've done a lot of work trying to help train activists in organizing protests and alternatives to the horrendous lifestyles that we have now.
I want to stop you there because I think I'm fascinated by the fact that what you're describing is a very broad definition of peace, because you're including either you don't call all of that peace work, you call it nonviolent resistance or something, not necessarily peace, or else you're redefining the notion of peace to include a lot of other justice issues, environmental wrongdoing, or various other kinds of risks that people experience that are apparently susceptible to intervention by nonviolent means, right? So you're defining your work very, very broadly, and I think it's time for us to think in those terms, that what we mean by peace or the work that we're doing. I think we need to expand the definition of what it is we're all about. If I can, throw you off balance a little bit with that question.
I agree with you. I think the peace studies movement and education movement has had a big impact on all of us to show the interconnections of peace and justice, and the importance of understanding violence in its various manifestations, including structural violence of poverty and oppressive systems, which cause enormous amounts of suffering and injustice. And we're very interested in helping people mobilize against violence, without violence. And so we see violence manifesting in various ways, including against the environment and against the ecology and against other species, and realize because of interconnection that we're setting humanity up for an existential challenge at the very least, if we don't really change how we and address the violence that we're doing to our planet.
Let me ask you a little bit about these outposts, because Mubarak mentioned a couple of branches or offices that Nonviolence International has maintained in other places that I'm not familiar with. And I wasn't aware that I believe you have somebody in the Philippines. Mubarak said something about Sudan. I also mentioned something about Latin America. Tell me about these other branches, or I don't know whether they're all active now, but to what extent is there any kind of interaction or collective projects, and to what extent are these kind of each branch on its own?
I would say that by and large, our model has been quite entrepreneurial. Mubarak has blessed people to go off, and as long as they follow our founding document, which says that we adhere to nonviolence, we encourage people to operate in their own countries, as we have folks now in the Philippines doing lots of work in the humanitarian disarmament field and conflict resolution field. We have folks in New York who are doing a lot of advocacy at the United Nations around nonviolence at the United Nations. We've had work in other parts of the world that has operated in Bangladesh. We've had folks in India. We've had folks in Burma. We've had a peace education program in Aceh, Indonesia during the civil war there for 10 years. So we've operated in a variety of different places, but mostly it's been peace activists, nonviolent activists who use our support to go off and do good things. And so we haven't tried to build a huge transnational movement of nonviolence. We are doing lots of work in various countries to promote nonviolence and help nonviolent activists.
You and I had a little conversation yesterday about the prospects for a global social movement. We can call it a nonviolence movement or something else, but clearly we're all looking for ways of knitting together components that have been sort of, I think, fallen apart in the last while. And to some extent, I'm optimistic about that because I think that it's maybe possible to organize groups more readily with mechanisms that are either free or very close to free. As for example, right now, we're using Zoom for a conversation that wouldn't have been possible even a year ago. So the fact that we have the option of talking to each other and conferring with each other as often as we want for almost no cost is a huge blessing. And of course, we can have websites and we can have other digital things that are virtually free. So I think the potential for reaching out and bringing people together, if we decide that's what we want to do, is very real. But as you pointed out, the cost of maintaining a real organization with a staff and an office and, you know, pay the taxes and all the other things that people have to do, fundraising and stuff, that's much more daunting. So I wonder if you want to reflect on whether or not we could be optimistic or pessimistic about building sort of a global movement along the lines that you folks have already been working on. And by the way, I don't want to just limit this question to you because I think all of you, all four of you, probably have concerns about the prospect of your own being able to maintain your own organization and do your own work, because you got to be paid. You guys have to be paid, and some other people don't.
I think COVID-19 is bringing forth a lot of the inequalities and structural violence that we have in the world. We know that there are, in the United States, African American and poor people are more susceptible to getting the virus and more likely to die. And we're seeing the lack of public health investment around the world really hit the poor and working class very, very hard. We have 130 million people in India who are unemployed now. And unemployed for many people means there's no way of even getting food and sustenance. So the COVID-19 virus is really exposing the downsides of neoliberalism, capitalism that's run amok. We've just heard this week that the billionaires have gained enormous amounts of wealth in the last 3 months, while the rest of the world has fallen into deep depression. So we have some enormous structural violence that's now being made very, very well apparent. It's true we have the electronic means to communicate well with each other, but the transnational movements really have a lot of work to do because the multinational corporations are very, very powerful and they're well ahead of us in terms of mobilizing resources and structures, not just having the communication, but really putting in the institutions in place that really run the world. And right now we're in a terrible situation where we need to mobilize transnational movements. Sustainable development goals is one frame that people are using. Human rights is another frame. We use nonviolence as a frame of mobilizing people against violence in various forms. We need to be mobilizing in a much more serious way to make progress. I'll just finish up by saying at Nonviolence International, we have a project that's devoted to nonviolent tactics. We have the largest now collection of nonviolent tactics ever collected. Gene Sharp called these nonviolent methods. We have a database on our website where we share the hundreds and hundreds of ways you can do nonviolent resistance and organizing. We also have the largest training archives in the world to help people learn how to do nonviolence training.
Do you have things like videos on nonviolence training?
There's not a lot of videos yet done on nonviolence training, but in 1 hour, I'm going to actually get on a live nonviolence training online. That this is still a new kind of endeavor, and I'm very keen to learn what's being done by, in this case, Extinction Rebellion and others, to see what we can do to move on training to the best of our abilities online. There hasn't been a lot of work yet done in this area.
Give me your sense of optimism or pessimism about how difficult it's going to be to carry on the kinds of projects you're doing now, or to expand them in different directions, given the changing economic situation that has resulted from the pandemic. Mubarak, what do you think?
You cannot imagine how I see the young people, especially if they are interns or volunteers, either in Washington or New York. And the amazing thing that they're able to do and help with their, not only their mind or anything there, they really do understand the essence of nonviolence and how to help others. And they are very, very committed to nonviolence. So the way we train them, the way we respect them, the way we give them freedom to do work is very much. And we are sponsoring so many people that nobody dare to touch. And that becomes our idea of how we could help people and not to be afraid because of a political or a regime or anything else. Mm-hmm. And that is still going on there, and that I'm very optimistic that things will continue.
Yeshua, tell me how things look from British Columbia and Bangkok. You've just got back recently from one of your stints in Thailand, right?
The reasons for optimism are there. And I've seen those building. I would say since the US invasion of Iraq, there's been a huge building of use of nonviolence around the world. We saw this incredible outpouring of something like 3,000 demonstrations in, I can't remember the number of countries, prior to the US invasion of Iraq. Unheard of before. Demonstrations in countries where that just wasn't known, and it showed a global rejection of using military force to resolve human problems. And just before the pandemic hit most of our countries now, there was a growing movement of nonviolent resistance to business as usual in exploitation of the planet. So we were seeing an incredible movement of people, very energetic, Extinction Rebellion being one of those, but many other movements, 350.org, mobilizing people to say, hey, we just cannot treat the planet like this anymore. And there was growing and growing numbers of people out on the street. Now, the pandemic has really hit us where our power base is, because our power base was numbers of bodies we could mobilize. Mm-hmm. And now all of our health authorities everywhere are saying, hey, don't get so many bodies together because mm-hmm. this is how the virus spreads. And so it has really hit our power base, as it were. And Michael was quite right to say that, you know, the forces on the other side are mobilizing. This is going to prove Naomi Klein's thesis in the Shock Doctrine, which if you haven't read, or even if you read before, it's time to review it. And we're seeing it today with the Chinese Communist Party changing the law on Hong Kong. And so many authoritarian tendencies are being reinforced by the pandemic currently in societies across the planet. To do things that they can do now, which normally they would not be able to do. And so this is a huge challenge that's in front of us. So what we're trying to do now is find out what are the nonviolent methods we can use within the current situation that we have of not getting responsive. We're being responsible by not getting so many people together in one place for a demonstration, not because we don't want to right now, but because we're following public health recommendations. So I see reasons for optimism and pessimism. Depends on how you want to look at it. I'm an optimist myself.
Yeah. Well, I think that clearly the pandemic has proved one thing, which is I think any fool now would be able to say, well, guns and bombers and missiles don't seem to be very good at fighting viruses. Because
well, it's not the big burly guys with the guns who are saving us right now. It's the diminutive people in white smocks, you know, and also we've got people experiencing clean air for the first times in their lives. Hundreds of thousands of people who never experienced it before. We were going to say, hey, what are we giving up? What our lungs? We're giving up our very lungs for this. So it is giving us opportunities as well.
Andre.
Something that is opportunity, but that we need to learn is how to effectively communicate in this new era where people are used to very short bits of easily digestible information. And I think that's a major problem that we're facing today. Unfortunately, the world is not made, or at least on a macro, on the level of our surrounding, it's not made of simple yes and no issues, and it's not black and white. And I think that we need to learn how to more effectively communicate with people, especially with the younger generation that fortunately in some ways, but unfortunately in some others, is not really used to serious analytical work. I feel that just basic logic conclusions are often quite difficult. That's not how people are used to think. But there's also opportunity that if we can make our own messages maybe clearer, more presentable, maybe we can more effectively explore this new world of communications. Like one practical issue that I have in mind right now is making objective information about what's really going on in the conflict zone in Ukraine easily accessible. The public simply continues to get the propaganda side of the war on both sides. An hour and a half ago, I was speaking to some of my close relatives who are older than me in Russia. And I was shocked to realize how effective state propaganda is. These are well-educated people. These are people that have, they are have PhD degrees and all that, and they have lots of life experience. They have very good education in natural sciences, and yet they sometimes it's like you're speaking to a TV screen.
Our task, in a way, is putting ideas out there in a form that people can absorb, but I don't know how to do it. Mubarak, what do you have by way of wisdom for us?
I really believe that if it comes to a point that people make their own choices, a lot of the choices they will have is a nonviolent choice. And the idea of militarism, the idea of destroying our climate and destroying nature is not going to work at the end. It's going to suffer. And this time of our life, we have to start thinking whatever we do ourselves affect others. And we should not destroy anything. And also to be very clear that the tree is important as well as, but human beings are more important than trees. We should not destroy any human being.
I have a great degree of faith in people because I generally see people motivated by what is going to enhance human well-being and what they think is right according to moral principles. Now, unfortunately, we're up against a machine that says, well, this is the way you do it. And many people do make a wrong decision. I don't think they're doing it wrong because they're evil. I think they're doing it because it has got fed into and warped that viewpoint, as it were. But in their heart of hearts, I still feel that if they have the right understanding, they're going to make the right choice.
Yeah.
And I think if you're not an optimist and believing in human people, you can't do this type of thing. That outlook is very Gandhian. I know that. I've been highly influenced by Gandhi. But that's the framework that I come from on that question.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm glad that we've got two optimists on the panel, and I don't know what the fourth fellow is going to say about this. Which side do you come down on, Michael?
I think I share, at some basic level, a delusion or a faith in people that there's still hope that we can collectively use our collective wisdom and energies to overcome all of the selfishness and delusions that we all carry, both individually and collectively in our communities and societies. It's a fascinating adventure that humanity is on. There's a lot of carnage, but there's also a lot of beauty and fantastic discovery. We think the tools of nonviolent resistance and approaches to solving world's problems are infinitely likely to be successful, more so than the ones of violence and militarism. And we invite everybody to join us in whatever way you can in that marvelous journey together. Thank you, Metta, for all the work you do, for all of your life, promoting peace education, transnational movements to fight the existential threats that face us. And you are one of the inspirations that keep the rest of us going with faith in humanity. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And may I play on your team? I really think you're the guys. I want to be my allies. This has been not only fun, but helpful. And I hope some people get a good look at it, because you fellows are really an inspiration. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, Metta.
Bye.
This conversation is one of the weekly series Talk About Saving the World, produced by Peace Magazine and Project Save the World. Please visit our website at tosavetheworld.ca, where you can sign the Platform for Survival, a list of 25 public policy proposals that, if enacted, would greatly reduce the risk of 6 global threats to humankind. Come back next week for another discussion of a serious global issue.